Welcome to Career Pod, your Audible career fair podcast. I'm your host, Dana Francis. I had so much fun chatting with Herman. He's just this down-to-earth, genuinely nice guy. And that doesn't really surprise me because a lot of people I really look up to come from education backgrounds. We get to chat about his role as a success coach, but we also delve into ideas of gender identity in the workplace. My apologies to my international friends. When we talk about salaries and job searches, we are speaking from a Canadian perspective. For sure, if you want to let us know about some of the local resources you might have available in your area, we would love to know. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search CareerPod. And without further ado, I hope you enjoy the show. Today, we are joined by German Villegas, success coach, producer of the podcast Modern Manhood, and mental health advocate. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
I noticed in my research that a lot of your previous work experience prior to becoming a success coach was centered around being a mentor and helping educate youth.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the rewards and challenges of being a positive role model and what it means to you?
Well, part of my job is a lot of it has to be preachy almost. I'm almost preaching to people, saying and reminding them that for a young adult, especially if you're a teacher, if you're an adult that has a little one in their lives, that you're their model regardless if you care or not. Those people are going to look up to you regardless of what it is, of what you do. So please be aware of what your attitudes and what your behaviors are like, because they're most likely to copy that. So I'm very cognizant of that as much as I can, even when I have little energy, little mental energy, little emotional energy. I have to reserve some energy for the kids that I see. Like, for example, like today, it's Friday today, like and it's like at the end of my day, and I'm just trying to finish as much as I can of this report. And I always leave my office door open at the school just because in case people walk in or want to just hang out. But some like two young men came in and just wanted to chat, just wanted to talk. I have to be very cognizant of being emotionally there for them, even if I have to say to them, I really have to work on this report, but I have to make sure that I'm like going to do it in a very polite way, in a very respectful way, because if I say to them, just get out of my office or whatever, blah, 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 then they'll go out and do the same thing. They'll think that's just a very normal behavior. So I try to be as respectful and polite to especially to the young people that I'm with, because they tend to model that. Not even just respect me, but they will go do that for the rest of the world. So yeah, it's a very long-winded answer, but yes.
I know you're telling me before that you're a success coach. It sounds like it could be a very broad job description.
Yeah.
What exactly does this career entail? And could you describe to us what a day might look like? Although it sounds like you've already.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. When I tell people I'm a success coach, right now my title is actually it's changed last year, but it's called Healthy Futures Coach. I used to be a success coach, but I go back and forth. None of those titles mean anything to anybody. They just when I tell them I'm a success coach or Healthy Futures Coach, they probably have an assumption that I'm like a Tony Robbins type person or like a life coach of some kind, which I'm not. So a success coach for me is somebody that goes into a school and teaches school about mental health advocacy inside the school and mental health organization inside the school. So, and that involves something called social emotional learning, or SEL, and that I try to infiltrate the school as much as possible about them talking about mental health and healthy relationships every single day. So that includes in math class and social class and science class, all the stuff that they do, like their awards nights, their band trips, whatever. I want to try to include a mental health message in everything they do. Obviously, some schools are kind of resistant to this. This is not a natural thing that most schools end up doing. So it kind of becomes, I have to make a relationship with the principal, I have to make a relationship with the assistant principal, with the teachers, with the students. And also that modeling part of it is just trying to model that, what it looks like, what it would look like for a school to do that on a day-to-day basis. So on a day-to-day, like there's many things I end up doing, and it all depends. Either I can be very reactive, or proactive. So if I'm proactive, it means that I will start wanting to talk to some of the teachers. For instance, I will go to a math teacher and say, hey, listen, you're doing a lesson on trigonometry, for instance. I know math is pretty hard on kids. They're very anxious about it. Do you want to talk about anxiety first at the start and see if they can have an understanding about anxiety and stress before they go on to do this math thing that they might be really anxious about? Cool. They might like it, they might not, depends on what it is. Maybe I'll go to another classroom and just be there for the classroom, and just so I can gain a relationship with the kids and also a relationship with that teacher itself. Or I'm planning an event. So for instance, like Bella Let's Talk Day is coming up. I might want to do something around Bella Let's Talk Day. Pink Shirt Day is coming up too. That's in February. So that's an anti-bullying campaign. Maybe the school wants to do something around that. So, and I try to help them, like prod them and push them to say, do something about these things, because it's very important. So my day-to-day kind of like bounces off of like talking to kids, talking to teachers, talking to principals, talking to school boards, talking to kids, talking to principals, to teachers, school boards, big circle around and just keep going until someone bites, gets out of that message.
Well, I mean, it's really hard for them. I mean, they're overworked as well. And I mean, it takes so long to come up with lesson plans. And then all of a sudden have someone else come in, oh, and can you add this to your lesson plan? And I can understand from a teacher's point of view that it might be a little stressful at times to have to make changes. But I mean, obviously they're for the better, and mental health is very important. And I really wish back when I was in math class, someone would have been like, it's okay to stress out, because I had a lot of anxiety over math. Like I took math 33 times.
And you know what? Like I'm an educator myself. Like that's my background. So I'm very cognizant of what you said. Like the teachers are stressed out. It's unbelievable until you actually see it, how much time teachers put in that they don't have to. And the time that they spend on the weekends, after school, all this time that they just do it because they want to make sure that these kids have really good educational lives. And yeah, I know that me coming in there and saying, hey, you know what, can you change this up a bit, or blah, 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 blah. I know that might come back and be like, well, I don't really have time to do this. And so I understand that. And that's what it is. It's all about relationships, and try to build those relationships and making sure that they understand where I'm coming from too. So, yeah.
What are some of the characteristics of someone that might excel in this line of work?
Someone, I think, they really, first of all, I don't think they have to love kids, but they really have to understand and tolerate them. If you don't, it's not that if you don't, people like, you don't have to like love kids all the time. But I mean, like I work with junior high kids, and I don't know, some junior high kids are little jerks sometimes. So it just means that you gotta have a little bit of empathy around where they're coming from and what they do. Kids, for the most part, are very good BS detectors. They can smell BS from a mile away. So as long as you're genuine with them, as long as you don't mess around and you tell them the truth of what's going on, they will be receptive to that. I think you'd be really cool about it. So I think it takes a lot of empathetic skills. It takes a lot of active listening skills. And it takes a lot of relationship building, that I think. And also a lot of understanding of education, and understanding of curriculums, and understanding of what it's like on a day-to-day life in a school. So that could be a teacher, that could be a principal, or whatever, or maybe you're a family school liaison worker, that you have some experience what a school life is like, of being in a school, because it is different. It definitely is different than just your normal office life.
Are there many jobs out there? And if so, is there much competition for them?
There are some jobs definitely in Alberta. For instance, I work for a mental health capacity building project. And that mental health capacity building project has a lot of different little spots in Alberta. So There's a lot of them in Edmonton. There's, I think, 3 or 4 in Edmonton that are all different mental health capacity building projects. There's some in, I think it's Westlock. There's one in Red Deer. There's a lot of these places in Alberta. Alberta Health Services are pretty good at trying to include mental health in different areas. They all do kind of different things too. Sometimes they do one-on-one counseling. I don't do one-on-one counseling with this specific project. I have in the past, but not with this one. But that means that, yeah, I think you have to understand what you're getting yourself into. Is there competition? Yes. There's a lot of people that, because this type of jobs doesn't have like a specific requirement. You don't have to have like, these are not just for education, people who are in education. You could be in social work, you can be in human ecology, you can be in education. All these people kind of qualify to be a part of being a success coach. My team specifically, I myself have an education degree. My coworker has a human ecology degree. I had an ex-coworker who has a social work degree and a counseling degree and like all these type of things. So there's many different ways where it can fit into this model. So yeah, there's a lot out there. There's still some competition as well too.
I realize there's going to be a fairly broad range of salaries from one sector to another, especially when there's so many different education levels coming to this position. But could you give us an idea of wage-wise what one might expect to earn? Yeah.
I mean, it all depends on what kind of, if you are kind of doing this work where you're being a mental health advocate, there's not really one specific role. There's many different types of roles and a lot of people do it. So for instance, there's a lot of roles in the nonprofit sector that are covered by it, and there's also roles in the public sector. I am fortunate enough to work in the public sector, and they usually, for the most part, I can't say all the time, but they usually pay a pretty well wage. So thinking about a teacher's wage, so about 50K up.
Okay.
But if you work in the nonprofits, I mean, if you know about nonprofits, you know that they don't really pay very well. So I mean, it's a great job, and sometimes you get it. There's pros and cons to that, absolutely. But I used to work in the nonprofit sector before I started working in the public sector, and they don't pay as well. I mean, you're starting maybe around the 40K mark. It's still good. It's just not as good as you would expect. So yeah, that's around the wage or what I could think.
And I'm guessing with being similar to teacher, there's probably some form of benefits as well, which
absolutely.
Is
yeah, and it all depends on where you go, right? Like when I started my position, I didn't get paid benefits, but I got a stipend for benefits, and I had to choose my own personal benefits. But now I get paid benefits through my county, which is great. I prefer that much better. I'd rather just do that. It's a really comprehensive benefit package. In my other nonprofit job, I did have a benefits package, but it all depends on what grant you go into, what kind of job you're going into, and that's definitely something if you are working, especially in the social work field, because there's a lot of type of things in the social work field. Take a look at that. The benefit part is really important sometimes.
If someone was looking for a job, like what would be some of the websites or some of the resources where they could find some of these job listings?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a specific resource like guide like you would. I mean, if you're in education, you can probably look at like the ATA guide or the Alberta Teachers Association or something like that. But I mean, in social work, they have their own certifications as well too. So they have their own thing. Same thing with HECOL, like human ecology, they have their own thing too. So, but saying that, I would look at any nonprofit that works with schools. There's a lot of them out there, especially in Edmonton, and all the public sectors as well too. City of Edmonton, province of Alberta, all the different counties like in St. Albert County and Strathcona County. All these places might either they're hiring family school liaison worker, which works specifically with schools, or they work something like a mental health capacity building stuff. It's like it comes every now and then, and sometimes they work directly with the school. So even like looking at their school website, like for instance, if you look at the Elk Island School website, or if you look at the Wood Buffalo or Parkland County or something like that, you can find all these different types of jobs, and specifically around mental health. So there's a lot of variety out there.
Back when you were a child, was this the kind of career path you had envisioned for yourself?
Oh, heck no. Heck no. No, it's funny. When I was a kid, Oh man, I haven't told this story in a while. When I was a kid, I used to love the Police Academy movies, and so I thought I was going to be a police officer. I didn't think it was going to be just hijinks, though, like the Police Academy movies. But when I started my university career, I went into computer sciences actually, and I went there for about a couple years, and I hated it. Hated it. No offense to anybody who's in computer sciences. I think that's a really hard job, and I think it's a really interesting job, but it was not for me. And my friend, she was in education, and she kind of like goaded me to be like, you know what, I really see you as a teacher. And so I did it. I applied for education. I got in, and I just kind of went on from there. But even then, I still took some loops and bounds as to what I thought it was going to be a teacher. And then I couldn't get a job as a teacher. I went to England for a year. I came back. I did a lot of like odd jobs. I did like a retail job. I did retail for a long, long time. Again, no offense to anybody in retail, but like, again, something not for me. But I stayed there for way too long than I should have. And then I did like a scriptwriter job. I did all these type of things. And then I got laid off from one of my jobs. And then I had to really reevaluate what I was wanting to do. And one of my friends who worked in a nonprofit, he's like, you know what? You have this background. You're good with kids. Like, do you want to try this? And it didn't pay that well. But I was like, you know what? I need a job. Let's try it. And I loved it, and I really did. I loved working with kids. I loved working with schools. I felt like I felt like riding a bike again. I was so gone from working in schools that I really missed it. And when I was finally working there, I was like, this is where I belong. This is really where I belong. It took me like leaving that space to actually understand that that's a place where I really wanted to be.
Many careers like yours, and also those in education, mental health, childcare, social services, I mean, they're still predominantly female traits when you look at percentages.
Yeah.
So do you believe there might be benefits to greater gender parity in these fields?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Although I feel like really lucky to work in a kind of in a very female dominated environment. Like I think education, like in schools, you'll see it in elementary school that is very dominated by women. But once you go up to middle school and high schools, what I've seen, I'm just talking by personal sites here. I'm making assumptions. But I do see kind of a half and half. Like there are a lot of males and a lot of women in junior high and in high school teaching. And definitely you'll see it in principals. You'll see definitely more male principals than you would see women principals, unfortunately. But saying that though, I'm in a weird position that I go from working in a school and then going to work for the place that I'm in. So I work for the public sector. I have an office in that building, but then I also have an office at the school. So I work in two different environments, and I kind of like travel back and forth from them. The school environment is much different than the public sector environment. So if I work for a community services, and that's like working with counselors, social workers, and all that stuff, trauma counselors and whatnot, that's definitely women dominated. I work in a place of about 80 personnel, 80 people. There's maybe 10 guys in it. So it's 1 out of 8. And it's really funny because all of us are like, I always say to them, like, we should have a suit wearing night, or we should have like a tie wearing night or something. Like, we should all band together. Like, it's kind of like a little camaraderie that we have because of that. But even then it's when I worked in retail, for instance, that was a very male dominated environment. So I saw the big difference in shift of how people interacted with me. Yeah, I mean, I still had bosses that were fantastic and also bosses that were jerks in both places. But the way I was treated as a guy was much different than I was with the male-dominated one. When it feels like I got a little bit of an advantage, even like going into an interview, knowing that you're one of the few guys that apply to this job, to a social work job or education job or whatever, a mental health job in general, kind of gives you an advantage. Because I think, and I credit this a lot to women who are, for the most part, very empathetic. They kind of understand that maybe we should have a little bit of diversity. So maybe hiring a guy is the right move. So because they'll see like, well, maybe that person will connect to our boys better, or maybe he'll bring a different perspective that we don't really understand, or really maybe that's something that we need. So I feel lucky in that sense that I know that I've gotten a kind of like, because I've heard it from other people, not that it's specific about hiring me, but like saying that, oh, we definitely need more guys in this. Oh, we definitely need more. I wish there were more guys in our field because of this and this and this and this. Like, a lot of our counselors, especially the ones counseling the little ones, most of them are women, but like when we have guy stuff, it's usually like the one or two guys that are there, and we have to like deal with the little guy, and it's an advantage for them too. So I think
when you say that like the numbers are lower in elementary, I was like, they are growing up with female basically as role models, because I mean school is pretty much most of your day when you're a child, and then you go from that, and then you finally start getting some more male teachers when you get into the high school ages. So it would be, I don't know if it would be beneficial at a younger age to have more male role models to look up to as your teachers, because I found growing up that I always looked up to my teachers, but I guess I was a bit of a nerd.
It's interesting you say that, because I think that definitely there needs to be a lot of the little ones, and I'm talking the people in elementary schools, the little guys in elementary schools, a lot of guys and girls in elementary school, to see guys in that kind of caring roles. Because in elementary, it's a different world than we're working in junior high and high school, because in elementary, you're definitely dealing with feelings, you're dealing with fights, you're dealing with conflict, you're dealing with attention and all that stuff. Like, you're basically like their second parent, more so than any other school. And so for them to see a guy doing that, they grow up to have this view of the world about guys, saying like, no, they can be caring too, and also the little guys can be like, well, he's being caring, I can be caring too. So it goes back to your first question about modeling. Like they see that, right? Once they see that there's this model of a guy that can be this person, that can be empathetic, and can be very caring and nice and comfortable to be around with, that's the person that they'll try to emulate, especially if it's a teacher that they really love and they really care about, because they can figure themselves back and say, well, I want to be like Mr. Smith, for instance, and because I know Mr. Smith really cared about me, and he like talked to me like we're level, and like he took care of my wounds, and when I cried, he didn't really shame me. Like, it's a completely different world, and I really wish that there would be more guy elementary school teachers. And it makes such a difference, I think.
Obviously, it's a very complex issue, but why do you believe more men aren't pursuing careers in these traditionally female-dominated fields, your quote-unquote pink-collar jobs?
Yeah, I don't know, to be honest. And I mean, I definitely have theories, and there's definitely a lot of societal theories around this, saying that there is, like, for the most part, men have been kind of socialized to be either the provider, or they're the person that takes care of things in a big quote, meaning like they'll fix the house, they'll fix the car, they'll give money, whatever. So, and again, it goes back to the thing of modeling. They'll see what their dad was like. And I think fatherhood is one of the big points of modeling, especially for young males. So when their dad in an older generation, that's what they saw, right? So, and then they were like, well, I want to be like my dad. And like, even if they don't want to be like the dad, they still have that in the back of their head that my dad did this. So they either end up emulating that value, not even that specific job, but that value of like, I need to provide, or I need to do something with my hands, or whatever it was, or I need to make money. That's also a prevalent point of like, of a socialized traditional view of masculinity is that we need to make a lot of money. So you'll see a lot of guys that go into things like lawyers or doctors or engineers or trades, and that becomes a problem because it's you pigeonhole yourself into specific categories. And when things like and you saw this, especially in Alberta, that the economy really hit people in the trades really hard. And I felt for the guys that couldn't pivot, because there was a lot of jobs in the so-called pink collar jobs that they could have gone into. They just either they couldn't pivot or they couldn't like adjust themselves towards doing that, or maybe doing something else. And I understand it. It's really like, I don't blame them.
Like, well, it's kind of hard to take a salary pivot. Like, I'm in the same boat. When you're used to making $40 an hour and then all of a sudden you have to pivot and you're making $15 or $20 an hour, you have bills that are already...
Exactly.
Like, you have mortgages, you have... I mean, luckily we don't have any toys, but they had a lot of debt, so I can only imagine the emotional stress, just feeling like you need to be the income provider and then being put into a situation where you're making a healthy income and then you're not. Right. You're sitting at home.
Yeah. And it's, I think the people who were able to survive in a way that they could. I mean, I'm sure you're right, you're not getting paid $40 an hour, but at the very least you are able to manage in a way. But are the people who they didn't identify themselves as like the trade worker or like I am the electrician. They're like, well, okay, so we don't have any more electrician jobs in this specific field. Maybe I could do something else. Like, as long as you don't identify what that is, I'm sure you can figure yourself out to work into these kind of quote unquote pink collar jobs. And also like, and I don't want to blame the trade. It's beyond even like the trade people. Like, when we grow up, like we're told, for instance, that if you're good at math, if you're good at sciences, you're a genius. Like, you even saw this in movies, like for instance, that you like the geniuses you see in movies are usually good at math. But if you're good at language, or if you're good at being empathetic, or if you're good at arts, you're not considered a genius. You're just considered something normal or something else. So men, in their pursuit of this kind of mastery, they usually go into the math field and engineers and the computer sciences or whatever it is. But they don't think of themselves as being successful if you're being successful in empathy or successful in communication or successful in mediation or anything like that. But that takes skill. That takes a lot of skill and a lot of practice. And I'm not as good as I want to be. I know I'm good in some places, but even then I'm like, I know I can be better. But I know there's a lot of guys that are really good at empathy, are really good at communication, really good at this, but they're not in it. I feel like, I'm like, society could be well served if you were like a teacher or if you were like a principal or if you were something like that. Cause sometimes I see these guys and I'm like, I think you're wasting your talents. But at the same time, like, I understand where they come from. And like I said, I don't really blame them because that's the way that they were socialized growing up. So hopefully that changes, because I feel like we can have a well-rounded society in that case.
So actually, a lot of this ties in really nicely to your podcast. Along with your day job, you are also the host to one of my newfound favorite podcasts, Modern Manhood.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about the podcast and why you decided to start it?
Yeah, so again, to your conversation that we talked about why I'm in that field and why I feel lucky to be in that field is social work and education. A lot of people kind of rooted all the young male problems, they got rooted to me and say, can you help this young man to deal with his life or whatever he's got going on? In that role, when I was working, that was like 5 years ago more, I started kind of like conceptualizing all these problems, that there was problems of identity, that there's problems with your father, there's problems with all these things. And they kind of just got me curious, started reading more and doing a lot of research around it. And then everything just kind of clicked to say like, well, I'm in a position to do something about this. So I started volunteering for this organization called Men Edmonton. And Men Edmonton is a place where a lot of guys wanted to try to come together and be allies in the community. And that's something I really like identified with and I really enjoyed. I have a lot of good friends in Men Edmonton. And so that kind of led me to doing the podcast. Well, I had an old podcast before, which I still do with my friend, and it was a hockey podcast. So, but I'm like, I have this knowledge and skills to do it. And I know, for instance, the research said that guys don't ever get a chance to talk to each other specifically around gender, specifically around the question what it is to be a man. And so I created the podcast to kind of give them an avenue to do that. And I realized in the podcasting world, like, I looked up and I was like, there's not a whole lot of podcasts around this. It's not a whole lot of podcasts around masculinity. There's podcasts about being a man, but it's very prescriptive. It's very like, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. I did not want to be prescriptive. I didn't want to tell guys what to do. I wanted to host a conversation where a guy is being inquisitive, is being curious, and is also like showing either vulnerability or asking questions that for the most part, guys don't really get a chance to ask. Like what it is to be a guy, what it is to be a father, what it is to be an uncle, whatever. And so that's where the show kind of took off. And as soon as I started doing more episodes, I wanted to branch off to other places. And I wanted to invite women into the conversation, and I wanted to invite some expertise and research and whatnot. So that's what it is mostly for the most part, is Modern Manhood. It's just an exploration of masculinity.
It feels like it's a safe space for men to say whatever it is they want to say. And I know, me personally, coming from working in the construction trades, those safe spaces don't exist in a lot of areas. Like there's a lot of times where men can't show emotion and they can't cry, and they're not allowed to, be concerned about their wife's health or their children. It's like they're somehow not a man if they actually care about their family.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of sad because I know that they care. And I know like the volunteerism that I do in Men Edmonton, I also got involved to do some surveys with Edmontonians, especially the guys. We partnered up to this program called the Alberta Men's Survey and the Alberta Men's Network. So we did a lot of surveys around what it is to be a guy. And a lot of guys I would say the majority of guys don't believe in violence, don't really want to be that person, but they're kind of stuck. They're stuck in these kind of old ways of living or this weird traditional masculinity that they're in. And they're stuck in this model that I think subconsciously, they don't even accept. So I have a lot of empathy for those guys because I know they care about their family. And I know they have these questions involved. And I know this because as soon as I started doing the podcast, I have a lot of guys that come up to me and to ask me questions, thinking that I'm like the wise sage, which I'm not. I'm really not. I'm just like asking, and I always like kind of throw it back at them. It's like, well, what do you think? Well, what do you think about this? What do you think? And usually they know the answers. They want to have the avenue to talk about it. And it's great because I got a chance to like talk to some people that I've known for years, but I've never asked these questions. So I kind of gave them the avenue and the space to do that. And so I think that to me is like the most rewarding part of it. But I also think that can be done anywhere. That can be done. Any guy could do this. They just need to have the space and the safety to do it. And so I think for guys is just to create that safe space to do that. And once you start that conversation, I guarantee you're going to have like a mind-blowing experience.
If people wanted to continue on with these conversations, where could they find you out in the interweb world?
Yeah, so I mean, you can find Modern Manhood at modernmanhood.org, and you can find all the episodes there. I mean, you can also find us on iTunes. I mean, find me on iTunes. You can find anywhere you find your podcast needs. You should be able to find Modern Manhood on it, and you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Modern Man Pod. I will answer anything and anything you want. I get a lot of emails, but I try to answer all of them. So send me a shout. I'm totally happy to talk to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to come talk to us today.
No, thank you. Thank you. This is great.
This has been awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you to be a positive role model? What challenges in life have you had to overcome to be a stronger person? Who are some of the people you look up to? They could be from work, home, a friend, or maybe a celebrity. I'd really love to know what's on your mind. If you'd like to join the conversation, please find us on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Just search CareerPod. If you'd like to help out the show, or any podcast for that matter, the best way to do so is to leave a review. Thank you so much for joining us today. Till we meet again, stay passionately curious.